Hello, everybody. Darren Cross here. We are in week 7, and this is chapter 8 of Business 149. Chapter 8 is about markups, markdowns, perishables, and break-even analysis. The break-even analysis I always thought was kind of a weird thing to include with the rest of that, but it's in there, so we'll talk about it. So, whenever people are in business, they are always, the idea of a retail business is to actually buy things at a lower price and sell them at a higher price. And depending upon the information that we have, people might mark things up differently. And we'll see what that really means as we dig into the material. That is... The philosophy behind it is not as important as knowing what we're really dealing with. But I think in order for people to really kind of make sense of things, they really should at least understand the basic philosophy behind this. So what we're going to be talking about is the ways in which people mark up things that they're going to sell, that they're going to resell later. And in order to do that, we have to set the foundation with these terms. Okay, so let's just talk about a couple of these things. Selling price. The selling price is the price that the retailers charge to the consumers, right? So the price is the price that you are actually going to sell it for, right? The cost is, those might seem like similar terms, right? But the cost is the price that the retailers pay to a manufacturer or supplier to bring the good into the store. So this item cost me this, and I resell it for the price, okay? The markup, the margin, those are really the same thing. Markup and margin are really the same thing. The difference between the cost of bringing the goods into the store and the selling price. So the difference between the what I bought it for and what I'm selling it for is actually my margin or my markup, okay? Operating expenses or overhead. These are the regular expenses of doing business, such as rent, wages, utilities, insurance, and advertising. Net profit or net income, the amount remaining after subtracting the cost of goods and the operating expenses from the sale of the goods. So these two things we're going to deal with later when we're dealing with break-even analysis, but these are the things that we're going to be dealing with when we're talking about marking up and the math that goes around that stuff. All right, so keep these things in mind because they are really going to matter. So let's look at this. This is a basic formula for selling price, right? So selling price equals the cost of something plus the markup. So once we buy it and we mark it up a certain amount, that tells us what we're going to sell it for. So we have the cost of something. This thing actually cost us, this fleece jacket actually cost us $18, and we marked it up $5. And so the selling price is going to be $23, 18 plus 5. Okay, that makes sense. So markup on cost. And what we're saying here, I don't want this to confuse you. If it makes sense, great. But if not, don't worry about it. When we mark up on cost, we're basing cost, or we're setting cost at 100%, right? So we're saying cost is 100%. So if cost is 100% and markup is a certain amount, then the selling price is going to be above 100%, right? So if markup, for instance, is 27.78, then our selling price is going to be 127.78 of the cost. Okay? Don't get hung up on that right now. So let's look at this. Gap buys a fleece jacket for $18. They plan to sell them for $23. What's their markup? What's the percent markup on cost? So we need, in order to understand what we're going through when we're doing all of these problems, we have to figure out, is the markup on cost or is it on selling price? It's going to be on one of the two. Okay, and they will tell us, but that's the thing that we're actually going to apply our percentage to, right? So let's look at this. Dollar markup equals selling price minus the cost. So the markup, if we go back here, let's see here. Markup, we said that cost plus markup is selling price. And then what they're saying is, What they're saying is dollar markup is selling price minus cost. Well, that makes sense. The markup is selling price minus the cost. So the amount of the markup, $5, is the selling price minus what it costs us. It cost us $18. We're selling it for $23. So the markup amount, we got to keep this in mind. There's going to be markup percentage and markup amount. The dollar markup is the actual markup amount, right? So then when we look at this, if we want to say it's the percent markup on cost, then what we do, we're always going to have the markup be in the numerator here, and whatever the markup is on is going to be the denominator, right? So the dollar markup on cost, well, we look at the cost. What's the cost? Cost is $18. The markup is 5. So 5 divided by 18 is 0.2778. But when we convert that to percent, that's 27.78%, right? So we're calculating the dollar markup and the percent markup on cost. The dollar markup is just real easy. You subtract, and this is going to change. This is going to stay the same no matter what. You subtract the cost from the selling price. If I buy something for $10 and I sell it for $20, my dollar markup is $10, right? But if we want to figure out what the percent of that markup is, then we take whatever the markup, the dollar markup is always in the numerator, and then whatever that markup is based upon, in this case, it's based upon cost, then that's going to be in the numerator, okay? So let's look at this. Calculate selling price when you know the cost and percent markup on cost. Now, this is the title, but just look, we're going to work through the problems and you'll figure out what's going on. We want to keep this formula here. Selling price equals how much this thing costs plus the markup, right? And this is marked up on cost. So that means that our rate is always going to be applied to our cost, right? So if you look at this formula and just start filling it in, right? So it's price equals cost plus markup or margin. Let's figure this out. Mel's Furniture bought a lamp for $100. To make the desired profit, he needs a 65% markup on cost. So it's marked up on cost. That means that our rate is going to be applied to cost, but it's going to be our markup, right? So it's marked up on cost. We don't know what our dollar markup is, right? But we know that it's based upon cost. So we're going to be multiplying our rate times cost to get our markup. What is their dollar markup? What is the selling price? Okay, so let's figure this out. Dollar markup is the same as markup, and this is on cost. So what do we multiply this rate? It's 65% on cost. So 65% of cost, right? So what is 65 times cost? Do we know what cost is? Yeah, it's $100. So 65% of $100 is 65, right? So then this is the formula. We start filling things in. And then when we work it out, we get selling price equals $100 plus 65. Now, we got some answers here. We know they ask us, what is the dollar markup? We know the dollar markup now. And then they want to know what the selling price is. Well, when we actually add these together, the selling price is going to be $165. You got to be paying attention to this. What is the percent markup on cost? Or just understanding dollar markup and percent markup, and you just work through the problem. So working through again, this is our formula. S equals C plus M. Selling price equals cost plus markup. You just start filling it in. Mel's Furniture bought a lamp for $100. To make the desired profit, he needs 65% markup on cost. What's the dollar markup? What's the selling price? Well, we don't know the selling price, right? They're asking us that. We don't know the markup, but we do know that it's 65% of the cost, right? It's going to be marked up. 65% is marked up on that cost. So you're adding this, you're calculating this markup on the cost. Do we know what cost is? Well, yeah. Let's fill it in. $100 is the cost. We don't know what markup is, but we do know that markup is 65% of cost. It's marked up on the cost, so it's 65% of that cost. So then, what's 65% of cost? $65. That's our dollar markup. That's what they asked for. And then we just continue on with the formula. Selling price equals cost plus the markup. We sell this thing for $165. Okay, calculating cost when you know selling price and percent markup on cost. So the percent markup is on cost. What does that mean? That means we may know what the dollar markup is, but if we don't, we know that it is marked up on cost. So let's just keep that in mind as we go through things, and let's work this problem. Jill Sport, owner of Sports Inc., sells tennis rackets for $50. So she sells these things for $50. Okay? To make her desired profit, she needs a 40% markup on cost. What do the tennis rackets cost Jill? Let's fill it in. Well, this is the formula we're going to use every time. S equals C plus M. Do we know what selling price is? Yeah, she's selling them for $50. Do we know what cost is? No, so we just keep the C there. Do we know what the markup is? We don't know what the dollar markup is, but we do know that it's marked up 40% on cost. So it's 40% of cost. We don't know what cost is, so we just include that variable here. But we do have a formula. Okay? So this formula is now 50 equals C plus 0.4 or 0.40 C, right? So 50 equals, if you combine like unknowns, right? That's 1. This is a 1. Remember, we assume that anything in front of the variable is a 1. We assume that this is a 1, and so 1 plus 0.40 or 0.40C is 1.40C, right? So we have 50 equals 1.40C. But we don't want to know, we want to get this cost all by itself, so we need to get rid of this. So in order to get rid of this, we divide by 1.40. So they're asking us to multiply, so we do the opposite process, divide, and what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So 50 divided by 1.40 is 35.71. So $35.71 is actually our cost. So if we put this in the formula, if we're selling it for $50 and we bought it for 35.71, then our markup is the difference between the two, 14.29. Okay, so as we walk through, we start with this formula every time. Selling price equals cost plus markup, and we just fill in what we know. If we don't know it, then we keep that variable, okay? And we just stay true to what they're asking us, okay? Now, the markups are based on selling price, and what they're saying now is that the selling price is the basis, or it's 100%. And the markup is based upon this. So all of our percent markup is going to be based upon the selling price. We're going to be multiplying our rate times the selling price every time now, right? Now that we have seen that there's two different ways marking up on price or selling price and cost, why is there a difference? Well, here's what we're really saying. When people are selling things, they're saying, okay, it all depends upon the information that they have. So if someone says, all right, I can buy pens for $1 a piece. I'm going to spend $1 and get a pen. Then they know, okay, for every $1 I spend, so that's a cost, I want to make 25 cents. So what they're saying is they have some information about what this pen costs them, right? So because they have the information on what a pen would cost them, they're probably going to do their markup based upon cost, because that gives them, they have enough information to make a decision. They know every time I spend $1, I'm going to make 25 cents. Okay? But sometimes you don't know how much things are costing, and you just want to say, okay, I know how much I can sell that for, right? So I can sell this pen for $2, and for every $2, I want to make a certain percentage of that. You don't necessarily know how much it costs, and this may come into play as you go through the formulas, and this is why break even matters. But the idea here is you don't know how much it costs, but you do know how much you can sell it for. And so in your mind, you're thinking, well, if I'm selling this pen for $2 and I want to get 50 cents off of each one, or I want to make, a certain percentage of that, I want to make 25% of the selling price. It's all depending upon the information that you have. It doesn't matter which way you do it. It's a retailer is going to make that decision for any reason that they want. And you, if you're in business, your deal is going to, based upon the information that you have, you're going to make decisions on how much money you want to make for different things. Now, that doesn't mitigate the fact that you can't really control what you can buy something for other than to pay market price. And also you can't control what you can sell something for unless it's the market. You can control it with understanding economics and supply and demand, and then also understanding marketing. But what I'm saying is when you arrive at the market value of something, you have to buy things at that market value and you have to sell things at that market value, right? Now, there are some things that help you understand that. But what I'm getting at is, if you're in business, you're not just going to say, well, I'm going to sell my item for $100. It's not going to sell unless there's a market for it, right? Now, you can make a market for it. You can make a market for it by the way that you position the product and that kind of thing. But we're assuming that there is a market for things, and you can buy them at a certain price and you can sell them at a certain price. Based upon what that is, you're going to require a markup on one of those items. Don't let that freak your brain out, because we're just worried about the math anyway, okay? So let's look at this problem. Calculating dollar markup and percent markup on selling price. On selling price. That means that the percent markup is always going to be based on selling price. The same scenario here. The cost to Gap for a hooded fleece jacket is $18, and they plan to sell it for $23. What's their dollar markup? What's the percent markup on selling price, right? So before we were asking what the percent markup was on cost. Now we're asking what the percent markup is on selling price. So this formula stays the same. They changed it up, but if you keep the formula, S equals, we could just as easily do that. Let's do it that way, because I think this can be confusing. Let's keep that same formula. So if we say S equals cost plus markup, right? And then we say, what do they say? All right, so the selling price is $23, the cost is $18, and the markup is $5. And they want to know the dollar markup. Let me do it somewhere else here. The dollar markup and the percent markup on price. All right, so they want to know dollar markup and the percent markup on selling price. All right, well, we know that this wasn't here, so we know that if we sell this for $23 and we get it for $18, that's the reason why they did the formula, right? So we know that this must be $5, right? So, dollar markup is going to be this minus this, right? So dollar markup is going to be $5. And then now what's the percent markup on price? Well, dollar markup is always going to be the portion, right? So dollar markup is always going to be in the top. The first thing you're going to do is, actually, I think this is confusing. So let's just, because you're trying to fill out the circle and you don't need to fill out the circle here. The dollar markup, you know that you're going to have a fraction, but the dollar markup is always going to be the numerator. And then what are they saying? It's on selling price. So that means that what goes in the denominator is the selling price. What is the selling price? It is 23, right? So then what is 25 divided by 23? I'm getting my calculator, which I encourage you to do. 5 divided by 23 equals 0.21739. 0.21739. We want to convert that to a percent, so we go boom, boom, 21.739. So round that up, 74. So it's 21.74% based upon selling price. That's what we have here. %21.74%. Calculating selling price when you know the cost and percent markup on selling price. Don't worry about what these things say. Just look at, you want to just fill in the blank here, right? So Mel's Furniture bought a lamp for $100. To make a desired profit, he needs 65% markup on selling price. What are the selling price and dollar markup? All right, so let's do this again. Let me get rid of all this stuff. So we're saying we're going to keep the same formula. S equals C plus M. And then going back, what do they say? They say Mel's Furniture bought a lamp for $100. To make his desired profit, he needs 60% markup on selling price. Okay, so he bought the lamp for $100. It cost him $100. He's going to resell it. So this is what it costs him, right? He's a furniture company, and he bought this lamp for $100, and he's going to make a profit. So the cost to him is $100, right? So the cost is $100. Now, what did we say? What did he say we need here? We need a 65, to make a desired profit, he needs a 65% markup on selling price. Do we know what selling price is? No, they actually asked for that. What's the selling price and dollar markup, right? So what's the selling price? And what's the dollar markup? So we know that it's a 65% markup on selling price, right? So what are we saying here? We don't know what the markup is, but we do know that it's 65% of the selling price, which we don't know what it is, right? So now we have a new formula. S equals 100 plus 0.65 S. Now we need to get these S's by themselves, right? So we need to get rid of this. And the way that we do that is they're asking us to multiply. Well, actually, we can bring this over. We want to, before we do anything, we want to actually bring this over. So they're asking us to add this 0.65S. So we need to subtract it, right? So subtract 0.65S. And what we do to one side, we need to do to the other. So subtract 0.65S. And this is 1, right? So this is actually canceled out. And we're left with 1 minus 0.65S, which is 0.35S equals 100. Now, we don't want to know what 0.35S is. We want to know what S is. So we have to get rid of this. They're asking us to multiply S times 0.35. So we divide. And then what we do to one side, we do to the other. So S equals 100 divided by 0.35. So let's see what that is. 100 divided by 0.35 equals 285. 85.71. So our selling price is, when we go up here, our selling price is 285.71. Well, if our selling price is 285.71 and we bought this thing for $100, then our markup must be 85.71. Let's see if we're right. Okay. I know it's a lot of moving pieces, but I wanted you to see us actually working through them so that you can kind of understand stuff. So again, don't let this freak you out. Don't worry about what kind of problem is this. What you're doing is you're actually just filling in the blank every time. You start with the formula every time. Jill Sport, owner of Sport Inc., sells tennis rackets for $50 to make her desired profit. She needs a 40% markup on the selling price. What is the dollar markup? What do the tennis rackets cost Jill? What are they asking? What's the cost? Don't let that change things. All right? So again, let me do it. It's the same formula. S equals C plus M. I'm going to go ahead and fill it out, even though you... Here, let me go back and forth. So as we're trying to fill this out, we need to know what we know, right? So selling price equals cost plus the margin. So let's see, what do we know? She sells the tennis rackets for $50. So let's go ahead and fill that in. She sells them for $50. We know that the selling price is $50. All right. So to make her desired profit, she needs a 40% markup on the selling price. Okay? So, do we know anything else? Do we know what the markup is? No, but we do know that the markup is based upon selling price and it's 40%. So we do know that whatever markup is, it's 40% of selling price, and we do know what selling price is. It's $50. Okay? And they're still asking for cost. We don't know what cost is. Now we have a problem that we can work, right? So 50 equals C plus 0.4 times 50. So 50 equals C plus, what is 0.4 times 50? 20. And we need to we don't want to know what C plus 20 equals. We want to know what just C equals. So we need to get rid of this. And so in order to do that, we do the opposite process. They're asking us to add 20, so we subtract 20. And what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So 50 minus 20 equals 30. 30 equals C. So cost is $30. Well, if cost is $30, then that means that the markup is $20, right? They did the reciprocal deal. I think that's a little bit confusing. Just fill in the formula. All we're doing every time is filling in that formula and seeing if we have it. If we have it, great, put it there. If not, it gives us instructions on what to do, right? She sells a tennis racket for $50. Well, selling price must be $50. To make a desired profit, she needs a 40% markup on the selling price. So we don't know what markup is, but we do know that it's 40% of the selling price, right? It's marked up based on the selling price, which means it's 40% of the selling price. Well, selling price is $50. And then we don't know. They're asking us what cost is. So we don't know that, right? We don't know the dollar markup. We just know the formula. So then when we work it out, here's the dollar markup. And if this is the dollar markup, then the cost must be $30, right? But we actually arrived at the cost by just figuring out the problem. We figured out what C equals. $30 here. Okay? This is confusing. If you did, and you can just use this, you're going to have your book when you do the test. If you want to use this, that's great, but I think it's confusing. As far as doing the math, I would not do it this way. But if there's a problem like this on your quiz, it's random quiz, so this might come up, just use this formula, okay? Now, markdowns. Markdowns are reduction from the original selling price. Sometimes we mark things down because they're just not, you always want to have a price that causes things to move, right? You never, ever want to have anything sitting on the shelf. So, if you're in business and something isn't selling, the price is too high. That's the gist of it. Now, are there some other things that you can mess with? Absolutely. It's really about the value equation. The price is too high for that item. Now, you can make that item better, but if you don't want to put the money in to make that item better, then you got to lower the cost. You never, ever want to have things sitting if you can avoid it. You always want to price it in a way that actually causes things to sell. All right, so markdowns are reductions from the original selling price caused by seasonal changes, special promotions, style changes, things like that. So here is the formula. Remember when we did percentage changes before? We want to there's two things that we're concerned with here. One is, what is the markdown percent? And it's always the difference or the amount of the markdown. So the difference between the original price and the new price divided by whatever the original price is. The original price is always the denominator. So in order to know what the dollar markdown is, we have to know that the dollar markdown is whatever that old price is minus the new price. Okay, and the new price is going to be lower, so whatever that is, right? So the dollar markdown, if something, Kmart marked down an $18 tool set to $10.80. What are the dollar markdown and the markdown percent? We'll start with the dollar markdown. Original selling price, it was 18, minus the new selling price, 10.80. So 18 minus 10.80 is 720. That is the dollar markdown, right? So they asked for the dollar markdown, 720. Now they want to know what the markdown percent is. It's always the dollar markdown divided by the original selling price. Always. What did we start with before? All right. So 720 divided by the original selling price, $18, that's 40%. Oops, sorry. Okay, so series of markdowns and markups. This is just keeping track of stuff, right? You just got to keep track of what's going on. This can get kind of confusing. So Jones Department Store paid a supplier $400 for a TV. On January 10th, Jones marked the TV up 60% on selling price. As a special promotion, Jones marked the TV down 30% on February 8th and another 20% on February 28th. No one purchased the TV, so Jones marked it up 10% on March 11th. What's the selling price of the TV on March 11th? We just got to go through a bunch of stuff here, right? So keep the same formula. Selling price equals cost plus markup. All right. Now, this is on January 10th. On January 10th, they marked the TV 60% on selling price. We don't know what the selling price is, right? We don't know what the selling price is. They're asking us what is the selling price of the TV on, or we need to figure that out. So we don't know what it is. We're just going from there, right? So we don't know what the selling price is, but we do know that the markup is 60% of the selling price. So we have a formula here. S equals 400 plus 0.60 S. Well, we need to get the S's together, so we need to get rid of this on this side. The way we do it is the opposite process. They're asking us to add, so we subtract. And then what we do to one side, we do to the other. 1S minus 0.60S is 0.40S. 0.40S equals 400, right? We don't want to know what 0.40S equals. We want to know what just S equals, so we do the opposite process. They're asking us to multiply, so we divide, and what we do to one side, we must do to the other. So S equals 400 divided by 0.40, which is $1,000. Okay, so on January 10th, our selling price was $1,000. So then what happened? On a special promotion, Jones marked the TV down 30%. Okay, you don't have to do any crazy things now, right? We just know that they marked it down 30%. So how did they do this? They said, okay, so on February 8th, they marked it down 30%. So they did it in a convoluted way. I wouldn't do this way, but they did it. They just said, okay, if they marked it down 30% and it started at 100%, then you're left with 70%, right? So 70% times 1,000 equals 700. So that's the selling price on the 8th. Another way that you can do this is to say, okay, 30% of this 1,000 is 300, and that's what they marked it down. So you subtract the 300 from the 1,000, and you come up with 700. So on February 8th, once they marked it down that 30%, the new price was $700. But then on February 28th, they marked it down another 20%, right? So the original price was $700, and they did the same thing. They said, well, $700 represents 100%, but we are going to subtract that 20%, the markdown, and we're left with 80%. And the 80% of 700 is 560. So you could have said, what is 80% of this 700? And that is, shit, I should have just stuck with it, with going the other way. 80% of the 500 is what? Actually, it's 560, right? So 80% of the 700 is 560. Or if you say 70, I lost my chain of thought, sorry. If you say 20%, if you say, okay, so we're marking it down 20%, what is 20% of 700? Well, it's 140. Now when you subtract 140 from that 700, you get 560. Okay, now they want to know what's the selling price on March 11th. On March 11th, they marked it up 10%. So it was 560. They marked it up 10%. How would I do this? I would say 10% of 560 is $56. So if you add $56 to 560, you get 616. What they did is they said, well, it's at 100%, so let's add another 10%. So 110%, or 1.10 times that 560 is 616. I know that your head could be spinning here because it's like, we're doing a bunch of numbers here and this is just crazy, but you have all the resources you need. I just want to walk you through the problem so that you can see how we do it in a practical sense. Okay, so pricing perishable items. This gets a little bit more complex, okay? So what we're doing with pricing perishable items is we're saying, okay, things can go bad. And so in order to understand how we, based upon the fact that things are going to go bad, how do we price things to get our what is the price that we should have in order to get our desired markup and that kind of thing? We're going to change this formula a little bit. Instead of saying the same formula we had, which was S equals C plus M, we're going to say total S equals total C plus total M. Okay, so let's look at the problem that they're giving us. Audrey's Bake Shop baked 20 dozen bagels. They expect that 10% of the bagels to become stale and not saleable. The bagels cost Audrey $1.20 per dozen. She wants a 60% markup on cost. What should Audrey charge for each dozen of bagels so that she will make her profit? Now here's the thing. Your cost is still going to be, you're not going to, just because your items go bad doesn't mean it still didn't cost you. It just means that the number of items you're going to be able to sell later is going to be less. Okay? So let's look at the facts. We know that bagels cost $1.20 per dozen. 10% of them we're not going to be able to sell, and we know that we did 20 dozen, and we know that the markup on cost is 60% on cost, so it's going to be 60% on cost. What are we solving for? The price of a dozen bagels. In other words, what are we going to sell for, right? So what do we sell a dozen bagels for in order to make our money? See, we have a cost. What we're going to do here is we're trying to figure out, we know that we have a cost here, but some of these are going to go bad, but we still want to make our money based upon cost. So what do we sell them for? Because if we price them and then lose, if we price them based upon cost and then we lose 10% of them, we didn't make our money. We have to say, okay, we had a total cost of these things and then we lost 10%. Now what do we actually price the rest of them at to get our money back, right? All right, so total steps. We got to figure out total cost, total dollar markup, total selling price, how much we lost, and then we're going to be sure to mark up based upon cost. So first, let's calculate the total cost. Well, there were 20 dozen. It was $1.20. So it's $24. It costs us $24 per dozen. So our total cost is $24, right? Well, what is our dollar markup is based on cost. So we don't know what it is, but we do know that it's 60% of the cost, right? So $24 is our total cost, and we do know that we want to get 60% based on that cost. So 60% of the 24. So we know that we want to make $14.40. Okay? So we know that what we need to sell everything for is, well, what we bought it for and this markup, right? So because that's our formula. Our total sales needs to be $24 plus $14.40. So we need to get $38.40 total. Now, we have 20 dozen, and we could say, well, we just divide 20 dozen, $38.40 by 20 dozen. But the problem is we don't have 20 dozen because 10% of them are going to be stale and unsaleable. So we have to take that out, right? So if we take that 10% out, we're only left with 18 dozen. So that's what we divide by. $38.40 divided by 18 is $2.13 per dozen. So we can sell these bagels for $2.13 per dozen. If we don't take this into account, we're not going to make enough money because we're going to divide this by 20 and this is going to be less. Okay? So be sure to go through all of these steps. Okay, so now we are going on to figuring out break-even analysis. And in order to do that, we need to understand this formula. Contribution margin equals selling price minus variable cost. What are we saying? The amount of your margin, we're not talking about, we're talking about like as a business now, right? So this is not fruits or bagels or, jackets or anything like that. We're talking about just whatever that item is, we're going to attribute a certain piece of it to paying your fixed bills, right? So if you look at this, contribution margin is selling price minus the variable cost. So in other words, what we're saying is we're going to take a piece of each of our item. We're not paying our variable costs because the variable costs are kind of included in there, and that leaves us with the money that we can pay our fixed costs with, right? So assume that Jones Company produces pens that have a selling price of $2. This is a coincidence that I used that example. And a variable cost of 80 cents. So in other words, they sell pens, right? And they sell these pens for $2, but with each pen that they sell, it costs them 80 cents. Well, what is a variable cost? It's a cost that's going to be associated with the sale of each pen. So the plastic that it takes, the ink that's inside of the pen. This is an electronic pen, but the ink that's inside of the pen, what it costs to actually mold this and put it together. For every pen that they sell, it costs them 80 cents, right? So that means that they only have $1.20 available. Well, it's their gross profit per pen. It's their contribution margin. In other words, this is the amount of the profit that they can use to contribute towards the rest of our expenses. Variable expenses are going to be along with the pen. So you make 1,000 pens, you're going to have $2,000. It's going to cut, or you're going to have 1,000 pens, and it's going to cost you 80 cents per each, right? So that's going to be $80. But you know that you can sell those 1,000 pens for $2,000, right? Now, $1.20 from each pen goes to cover the fixed costs. So the fixed costs are those costs that are going to stay the same no matter how many pens you sell. Rent, electricity. Electricity can be variable. Some accountants try to attribute, to the extent that they can, every single thing to each item, but it's going to be tough. So rent, insurance, salaries, things like that. So this is what we do to figure out break even. So if we, hang on, what happened here? So our break even point is the amount of our fixed costs divided by our contribution margin. So let's look at this. Jones Company produces pens. They have a fixed cost of $60,000. So each month they have to pay $60,000 regardless of how many pens they sell, right? So each pen sells for $2 with a variable cost of 80 cents. So if we go back, our contribution margin is $1.20, right? So that's what we're really saying here. $60,000 divided by the contribution margin, or $1.20. And that equals 50,000 pens. So what we're saying is, in order to break even and cover our bills every month, we have to sell 50,000 pens, because only $1.20 is going to go towards our costs. Now, ideally, we want to make a profit, right? We want to make a profit. But when you are in business and you're looking at a business unit or something like that, you know you got to at least cover your expenses. And sometimes, depending upon how you structure your business. So if I say, hey, I'm in business for myself, I sell these things, and I have to make $100,000 a year, plus my rent is this, and my insurance is that, and, I have other employees. So my expenses are going to be $20,000 a month, including my salary. That's an okay way of looking at it. Your deal is, okay, well, I'm paying my salary. The company's not necessarily profiting, but I'm paying my salary. So that's a reasonable way of looking at this. Okay? So I know a lot of this stuff is convoluted, but if you have any questions about anything, feel free to reach out and I'll help work you through it. Good luck, everybody.